We have found something this week on which our nation can agree. The American people agree that it would be bad for the nation to go totally catastrophically bankrupt all at once, that we all have to move out of our houses and take up living in yurts and milking goats. The American people agree that, even though it might be fun for a weekend, is a bad idea for the country as a way forward. In a new poll released just this evening by NBC and the Wall Street Journal, nearly two-thirds of Americans say that, Republican doubts aside, failing to raise the debt ceiling would be a, quote, real and serious problem. 10 days now into this government shutdown, this same survey from NBC and the Wall Street Journal finds that Americans are also really quite clear about who they blame for this mess. They blame Republicans by a margin of 22 points. It is not close. And that, of course, is not good news for the Republican Party. Now, to be fair, it's not like it's roses for anybody for things to be this bad. Look at this. President Obama is about 6 points above water. It's favorable, unfavorable. So his positive ratings are 6 points higher than his negative ratings. The Democratic Party is actually underwater by a single point. Their positive ratings are 1 point lower than their negative ratings. Okay. But look at this. House Speaker John Boehner, whose Republican Party is blamed for the shutdown, he's at minus 25. The Tea Party movement, they're at minus 26. The Republican Party, the entire Republican Party, checks in at minus 29. That's the end of the world. That's terrible. That's 28 points south of the Democrats on the favorable, unfavorable scale. That doesn't exist in two-party states. The Republican Party has never polled lower than they are polling right now in the history of this poll. Why do people dislike them so much right now? Well, in the same poll, 70% of people say Republicans are putting their own political agenda ahead of what is good for the country. These are horrifying finger vision numbers for Republicans. These numbers in tonight's brand new NBC Wall Street Journal poll. These arrived on top of yesterday's Gallup numbers, which were also historically bad numbers for the Republicans. The Gallup survey over the last 20 years shows that in the past 20 years, Republicans have really never been as unpopular as they were in that moment in December 1999 when they voted to impeach President Clinton. I mean, nothing could compare to December 1998, sorry. Nothing could compare to the plunge in the polls that they took there in December 1998, right? Nothing could compare to how bad that was until now. Now they're even worse than they were then. Americans disliking the Republican Party right now more than they ever have in modern history. And maybe this avalanche of seriously bad news for the Republican Party explains more than anything else why we may have started to see the very beginning of the start of the beginning of the end of this crisis today. Maybe, hopefully, possibly. Joining us now to talk about whether the policies being put forward as a way out of this political crisis make any sense as policy, regardless of the politics, is the great Ezra Klein, MSNBC policy analyst, editor of Wonk blog for The Washington Post. Ezra, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, on the debt ceiling thing, the market went through the roof today on excitement that the debt ceiling catastrophe might be averted. Then we found out, well, it's not a done deal yet, and it would only be for 6 weeks. Was the market right to be so happy?
The market was, I think they were, actually, because I think the fundamental thing the Republican Party decided over the last 2 days was they do not want to fight over the debt ceiling. And what was interesting about it was it wasn't just the Republican Party, right, because that no longer matters. Also, the Tea Party decided it. The big thing that happened today was the Heritage Action Fund, which now apparently for some reason runs the Republican Party. They came out and they said, if you guys vote a clean debt ceiling increase, we will not be mad at you. We will be okay with you.
We said we don't want a debt ceiling, but we won't score it. We won't hold it against you.
We won't be mad at you.
It's a mealy-mouthed, miserable.
Very mealy-mouthed. Yeah. But that was a very big deal, right? Because that meant both Boehner's team, and remember, Boehner originally, he had wanted to not do a shutdown, but to have a debt ceiling fight. And the Tea Party now are both saying, a shutdown is much better for us than a debt ceiling fight. We don't want to muck with any of that. It's not a good idea. So I think the market is right to read that as Republicans actually in a serious way backing off the debt ceiling. Although it happened tonight, and I don't think we 100% know what happened at the White House, and both sides seem fairly positive about it. But the White House kind of said, look, we're not necessarily interested in a short-term debt ceiling increase if you don't reopen the government too. Right. So it isn't actually clear that we're at a deal yet, but I do think the Republican Party is backing down on that in a big way.
And if if the deal remains the same later into tonight, we may be here very late tonight.
Yeah.
If the deal remains the same into tonight and into tomorrow, where the only thing they're talking about in terms of the debt ceiling, even with that relief of political pressure from their own side, is a short-term thing, is 6 weeks or 5 minutes or whatever it's going to be. Do you expect that the White House would continue to hold out for a longer fix to that problem? Because it is such a dire problem if we run up against it again.
So the White House has actually said they're open to a short-term debt ceiling.
What do they consider to be short-term?
I actually don't know about that. But what they're not open to, or what they've said until now they're not open to, is one that does not reopen the government. That is their sticking point right now. That the Republicans are saying, we want to put the debt ceiling off, but we won't reopen the government. We're going to keep the shutdown going, to fight over the shutdown, to try to get concessions out of you to end the shutdown at some point. And actually now you're seeing sort of the opposite thing happen. The Republican Party used to want to move to a debt ceiling because the more dramatic, catastrophic consequences would give them leverage. In a way, it almost seems now like the Democratic Party is taking a bit of that approach and saying, we are not going to let you separate these two things.
Right.
You're going to have to end both of them, or you're going to take the pain. And you can see in the polls that they will be the ones to take the pain for the debt breach.
The NBC News Wall Street Journal poll out today that I think, Luke, I don't think it's self-serving of NBC News correspondents to be talking about it as going around like wildfire today. Everything that I could tell about was happening on Capitol Hill today was about
it was
this
an
poll
earthquake.
Yeah, it really hit like a ton of bricks. One of the things that it showed in terms of policy is that something about the shutdown process has made Obamacare more popular. Last month, 31% of people thought it was a good idea. Now, 38% of people think it was a good idea. People who used to like the idea of maybe shutting down the government even as a way of trying to defund Obamacare no longer like that idea. Do poll results like that and the way these negotiations have gone thus far mean that actually the ongoing discussions here and the ongoing fight is not going to be about health reform at all?
I think that's completely right. I mean, and it is worth saying, the totality of the Republican Party's strategic failure here on Obamacare almost cannot be overstated. This has been a much worse launch than even skeptics thought they would have. The fact that people still can't, on their first try, buy health care insurance, that is a huge failure on the Obama administration's part, on the simple running government correctly, running it well function that they have to carry out, separate from all the political fights. If the Republicans had not done this, all this week would have been about, and last week would have been about nothing but how badly Obamacare's launch is going. And maybe they could have used that to make an argument for delay that would have made sense to people. As it is, they have picked a tactic so much more unpopular than Obamacare. They have made Obamacare look good in comparison, and they have moved away. There's not actually been as much, I think, for most people who are not that obsessed with the news on this stuff. The A1 coverage is shut down, it's debt ceiling, it's fights. The Obamacare stuff, they know there are problems, they know there's a lot of demand, but there's not nearly as much focus on it as there otherwise would have been. So people are probably getting a hazier thing, and you might actually just be having some of the rise and falls, not just from Republicans, but now just people are hearing, a lot of people want it. You know, it's probably not working that well, in part because Republicans have shut down the government.
Yes.
This is a very bad thing for a party that wanted nothing but to damage Obamacare. They have helped it.
And what it got for the people implementing the Affordable Care Act was the benefit of a soft launch. Mm-hmm. You launch something soft and you don't put ads out about it, right, if you think it's going to be a lousy thing when it comes out. So you want to, like, sort of work out the kinks while nobody's paying attention. Now they get that chance. By the time we get the government open, people might actually be able to get health insurance.
Yeah.
Ezra Klein, exactly right. Editor for the Washington Post Swamp Flag. Ezra, thank you for being here. If you do end up here being here very night, I will buy the coffee.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. There's an added element of scary to everything that happens during a government shutdown. Like, for example, how would we respond if there was, say, a major oil spill? Not a rhetorical question, and Barney Frank joins us just ahead. Stay with us.